Okay, it is so great to have Senator Mike Lee here today. Oh, wait. Wait a minute.
Oh, that's good. Congratulations.
I think I've got the wrong Mike Lee. Mike Lee is a professional, political, and motivational speaker. He's a radio talk show host, owner of the Queen City Funeral Home. Is that Queen City, Texas? He is a retired Navy hovercraft LCAC pilot. Mike, what is LCAC?
Landing Craft Air Cushion.
Okay. And flight instructor. Did I lose it? Is it on? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Hello.
Get out from in front of that.
He's an LCAC pilot and flight instructor who logged over 2,000 flight hours. When he began, he was one of 12 worldwide in that field. During the first Gulf War and under his leadership, his detachment was awarded and remains the only LCAC detachment to receive the Navy's Battle Efficiency Ribbon, Navy Unit Commendation, and Combat Action Ribbon. Additionally, under his leadership, the detachment was recognized for the astounding number of crew members who qualified as surface warfare specialists. Mike also served as a recruit company commander, Navy drill instructor. While assigned to Assault Craft Unit 5, Mike specialized in Marine ship-to-shore movement, as well as insertion and extraction of Marine recon and U.S. Navy SEALs. Now speaking on American exceptionalism. In a time when so many strive to convince us just how terrible America is, Mike Lee travels our nation telling the story of our greatness. He speaks about what sets us apart from the rest of the world and the role that each of us play in our own freedom. Mike will leave you motivated, energized, and proud to be an American. And I'm proud to introduce to you Mike Lee.
I've got a wireless mic. You got me potted up there, so I can turn this one off. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And just so you know, let me get this started right off the bat. I do this with a lot of different groups, and not all of them are conservative groups, okay? A lot of them lean to the left. Of course, that's who we need to talk to, right? You already know it. I don't need to come in here and tell you all this stuff over and over again. So I won't be offended if you walk out, because I've had it done before, okay? The other thing is, I was standing here and I was looking around, I thought, how nice it is to have all these cameras. And they're conservative cameras. Because normally it's the left down there filming everything I do right here in my face going, you won't believe what he said. You won't believe what he said. You know, joke's on them. You don't have to film it. If you just call me, I'll say it again. It doesn't matter to me. You know, I don't hide anything. You know, I was here 2 years ago. Wow. And my question is, it's been 2 years. Have I gotten better looking?
Yeah.
I thought Bob was going to laugh. I was here 2 years ago, and I was really surprised. When I came and I spoke to your group, it was at a different facility. I came in, I'm always ready to give a certain speech. Of course, you can see me up here. I never know what I'm really going to say until I get up here. But this was after some of the elections and some of the things that President Obama had done. And the mood in the room was just somewhat depressing. And I walked in and I thought, you know what, I can't talk about that now. I can't say those things. Because everyone was so upset. So I thought, you know, I'm going to have to change that up. And so it's really changed the way I go out and speak to the groups around the country. Now, one of the things you're going to figure out right off the bat while I'm up here, I'm a lot like that minister who got his first church. You know the guy, green behind the ears, never had his own church before, got his calling, wanted to make a great impression. So he sits down and he starts writing his sermon. Spends a couple of weeks. So when that first Sabbath day came, he goes out and he's standing by the door waiting for the congregation. Only one guy showed up. Well, of course, he was upset. He goes in, he sits down. He waits a little while, and he walks down. It was an old farmer. Bib overalls, nicest flannel shirt he had on. And he walks over and says, "So what do you think? Should we even bother?" Farmer sat there for a minute, and he looked around. Finally, he looks up at the preacher, and he says, "Well, I don't know a lot about these things. But I do know if I loaded my truck full of hay, drove it out to feed the cows, and only one cow showed up, I'd feed him." Right? And isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? We don't care what size crowd. We all need to be out speaking to everyone, even if it's in the bank line talking to the person behind us. Well, so the preacher goes up there and he's talking. And he gets done. He walks down. He was proud, grinning from ear to ear. Had to be a record, 1 hour and 45 minutes. Been there, done that, huh? 1 hour and 45 minutes. He walks in, he looks at the farmer, and he says, "Well, what'd you think?" The farmer sat there with his hat in his hand. He played with it for a little while, and he looked at me. He says, "As I said before, I don't know a lot about these things, but I do know that if I loaded my truck full of hay and drove it out to feed the cows, and only one cow showed up, I wouldn't feed him the whole truckload." That's really where we make our mistakes sometimes. And there's a point to what I'm saying here. It's our responsibility. That's how we make a difference. Remember, they have the media. And it doesn't matter if they lie. The president and this administration, the people on the left, they can say whatever they want to say, when they want to say it, how they want to say it, and nobody's going to rebuke it. No one's going to say anything. And they've got them. It bombards us on TV. Your kids hear it. Your teenagers hear it. Your grandparents hear it. Everybody hears it. And if it's on TV, it must be true, right? Okay. So let me tell you what I do. I talk to everybody. Everywhere I go. Do I, Trace? I talk to everybody. And in the bank line, these are the ones that get me. You're standing 5 people in the bank line, and there's a person behind you and one behind them. And that last person starts telling the person in front of you very loudly all the political lies while they're waiting. See, they're using that. They believe in time management. So the left, every opportunity is an opportunity to get out there and tell that story. And so they start talking. And you know what we do as conservatives? And we turn back around, we roll our eyes. Except for me. I turn around and I go, "That's not true." And that's not true. You should be ashamed for saying that. And you know what they do? They turn and they run like deer. Because they don't want to be confronted with the truth. They'd have to explain something then. They're not going to do it. They're not going to explain anything. I've been doing this. I just had an anniversary. Not our wedding anniversary. We've been married for over 28 years, going on 29 years. I just had an anniversary, 20 years, that I've been going out and doing this all over the country on my own dime. And you know why I do that? I know you know. Because you're exactly like I am. Because you're a patriot. Because you understand what's at stake. Now, I go all the way back 20 years. I started doing this with Bill Clinton. And I started volunteering on campaigns. I started campaigning. I started going out, going door to door, doing things. And it wasn't always pleasant. Let me tell you something. I went to a door one time. This is when Clinton was in office. I went to a door. I knocked on the door. A lady comes out. She answers the door. First, I heard a very loud and coarse, "What do you want?" And I stood there for a second and said, "Well, I have some literature for you." She comes to the door. It's a lady about this tall, very large. Do you ever watch Bart Simpson? And the mother has the hair about that high on top of her head. It was a lot like that. I hope I'm not describing it. And she had these cat eye glasses on with the little chain that goes around the neck. Okay? And she had a cigarette in the corner of her mouth with about that much ash on it. And I remember her thinking, how's that not falling? And so I gave her my spiel, and she, when I was finished, pulled her cigarette out of her mouth, blew the smoke in my face. And she says, yeah, right. So you could leave me naked in the street with no medical care. And she slammed the door in my face, almost hit me in the face. And I thought, my goodness. Now, for just a moment, I was a broken man. I turned around, I walked down the steps, and my first thought was, I need to go back up there and straighten her out. But I didn't. But I tell you what I did think. There were two things that crossed my mind. One, the level of deception. I felt sorry for her for a moment. Who had lied to her to that extent? To make her so angry about something that we as conservatives weren't even doing to her. They had deceived her that much. That was the first thing I thought. The second thing I thought was, never, ever, in her wildest dreams, had I ever thought about leaving her naked anyplace. She had me confused with Bill Clinton. So, that's Bill's thing, not mine. Okay? But we have to be persistent. I kept going. I was out with a campaign sign. How many of you know who Bob Filner is? Remember, he was the former congressman. He was the mayor of San Diego. They just got booted out of office. And in Bob's defense, all the terrible things that they said about him were not nearly bad enough. Bob's a lot worse than that. He was not reaching his level of, I guess, well, I don't even know what I want to call it. He's not a good fellow, okay? I ran for Congress in San Diego while I was on active duty against Bob Filner, okay? Bob was a horrible guy. But I do remember, going out on the street corner. There's another guy in the race, Juan Vargas, who was a city councilman. And he was on the left. And I saw him one day, and he was out there with a Santa Claus hat on and a sign saying, "Season's Greetings." And I thought, okay. There was a drugstore, so I went in and got me a big Sharpie and a great big piece of this foam board. And I wrote a sign. And I walked across the street with it, shook his hand, stood right beside him. So we stood out there for about 30 minutes with all this traffic coming by and everyone just rolling, laughing. And I just kept waving at cars. He kept waving at cars. And then pretty soon he leans over and he looks at my sign and he gets really red in the face. About another 5 minutes, he goes, "I think I need to call it a day." I said, "Oh, nonsense. Stay. We're just getting acquainted. We're going well." He says, No, you got me at a disadvantage." So he walked off. What he had done is for 30 minutes he had stood there. I had my sign, "Leave for Congress," and he had "Season's Greetings" with a Santa Claus hat on, helping me campaign. So what we have to do is we have to go out and not be afraid of them. Because I'm going to tell you, most conservatives, most people on the right are afraid of confrontation. They don't want to go out and say, that's not true. They don't want that in-your-face kind of campaigning. And they do it. Well, let me tell you something else. It's not just the left. We got our own party doing that. I'm a staunch Republican. I tell everybody, I'm not leaving the Republican Party. Never. Let me tell you why. Because it's my party. And there's nothing wrong with the Republican Party. We've just got to take those guys who are progressives and throw them out. That's what we've got to do. Let me tell you what happened. When the progressives started, there probably wasn't any more of them than what's in this room right here. And they got organized, and they are, and they're patient. And let me tell you what they did. They walked out, and they said, okay, everybody on that side of the room, go to the left bulkhead over there, the left wall. Everybody on this side of the room, go over to the right wall. Okay, you guys are Democrats, you guys are Republicans. Everybody go get elected. And they did. And now, that's why you see a group of Democrats, a group of Republicans, and they're doing the exact same thing. There's no difference. That's what's happened to us. The progressives are in there, and we got to root them out. That's what we've got to do. You just got to root them out. There's nothing else you can do. And you got to stop being nice about it. I'm not. Those days are gone. I had the days when I was politically correct, and I would do that little talk thing where they'd say something and say, I don't really agree with that. Now I just say that's a lie. And I hear a gasp in the room. You called him a liar. Well, he is. How come you didn't gasp when he told a lie? That's what should have happened. We'll be having our own party. Now, any of you know Bob Hall over in... Yeah, Bob Hall, great guy. Bob called me up one day. I'm going to tell you a little story I'm sure you've never heard. Bob called me up one day and he said, Mike, before he got elected, I need a favor. Sure, anything I can do, help a conservative. He says, well, I'm running against Senator Dool, and I'm sure he was a great guy. But we've got several events that night, and I can't be at all of them. So I need a surrogate speaker, and I've done that for a lot of different congressmen and senators. I said, sure. Well, you know what a surrogate speaker does. We walk up, generally you give me a couple of paragraphs, and I'm going to read it. So we get there. Bob's wife was out front, and she was kind of like a cat on a hot tin roof. She says, they're up to something. So Tracy and I walked in, and I said, it's okay. We'll deal with whatever it is that they've got going. Well, the group had set this thing up. As soon as the senator came in, they took him into the back room. And they sat, and they had a meeting. When they came out, we go up on stage. They had me go up first. That's the proper thing to do, okay, because he's a seated Texas senator. So I got up there and I gave my little 2-minute thing. Now let me tell you, I've been doing this for a lot of years. When you call my name there to come up, my name starts when I get here and start talking, right? That's the way that works. Not when you call my name when I'm sitting over there. And that's what they did. They started to clock, okay? They didn't with him, but they did with me. So I gave my little thing for Bob Hall, and I walked off the stage. And that's the right thing for me to do, because that's the senator. I gave my statement as a surrogate speaker. One of the guys that set this thing up walks up to me and he says, you need to go back up on stage. I said, why? Because we're going to have a debate. I said, well, I'm not the candidate. The guy smiles and he says, I know. But he didn't care enough to come, so we're going to have you debate the senator. And I said, really? You really won't? Because that's not my job. I'm a surrogate. Surrogates don't know anything. Yeah, but he sent you. So we decided he was going to debate you. Okay. And so they did. I won't go through all the details of it. But when I left the stage, the senator was shaking like this. All of those guys were laughing. The timekeeper stops me and says, okay, you got us. We didn't expect that. There's a lot of things I can tell you. I have some negatives, some things I just can't do, but debating's not one of them. Okay? It just happens to be my forte. That's what I'm good at. And so the senator runs down off the stage, and he grabs my hand, and very loudly, you can hear a pin drop, very loudly goes, oh my gosh, you are so good. I said, okay, I can't believe you just said that, but okay. And he asked me, where are you from? I said, Texas, how about you? He says, well, where do you live? I said, just south of Texarkana. And he goes, oh, Bob Hall brought you all the way down here to do this to me? I said, no, he brought me down to read a statement, which I did. You had me do this to you when you decided to have me debate you. When you decided to break the rules, when you decided to be immoral, when you decided to do the wrong thing and give the wrong impression to all the people who came to listen to that, you did that to yourself. Now, one of the things, he made a statement up there. I talked about waste, fraud, and abuse. And he said, well, I'm not aware of any waste, fraud, and abuse. And because it was his turn, and he didn't figure I had rebuttal because the next thing was closing statements. You see any knots on my forehead? I did not fall off the turnip truck yesterday. I've been doing this a long time. So he says, I have asked everyone to give me specifics. No one has given me specifics. I've begged Bob Hall to give me specifics. And I knew if he had asked Bob, Bob would have given it. But, so he sits down. Now it's closing statements. I got up, forget closing statement. I said, you want specifics? I'll give you specifics. And I talked to him about the minute you come out of the hospital because you stubbed your toe, you got 1,000 people calling you saying, we're going to give you a hospital bed, we're going to give you a porta potty, we're going to give you diabetic shoes. You're not diabetic. We're going to give you everything they can possibly give you. And you know who has to sign off on that? The doctor. And I said, so, Senator, don't say you were unaware, because either you're a really bad senator or you're a really bad doctor. Which is it? Tell me. He didn't want to go any farther than that. That's what we have to do. We have to call them out. That's what we do. To me, I leave no stone unturned. Look where you've gone now since the last time I was here. Joanne is on a citizenry advisory. Whoever thought that would happen? Who thought that would happen? But because of you guys and what you've done and how you just keep pushing forward, now people have turned. Now, we haven't turned the tide. We're not making the country go the way we want it to go yet. But you know what? It's like that drowning guy. Are you going to stop swimming, or are you going to stay up on the surface as long as you can? I don't know about you, but you're going to have to hold me under. I'm not giving up. That's just who I am. Whoever thought that you would have that? Now you've got a voice, and people are listening. They don't like it, some of them. I went down to the governor's inauguration. Anybody here go down to that? It was great. Tracy and I were invited to the governor's inauguration, to the barbecue, and to the ball that night, and it was wonderful. I went down there and I listened to the governor and the lieutenant governor. And I got to tell you, with the military flyover and the cannon shooting, my heart just swelled. And to hear these guys actually get up publicly at an event like that and talk about cutting taxes. They talked about defending our border. The things that we need to do. The right thing to do. And then Governor Abbott said, Texas, I don't know what kind of threats we had gotten, but he said, Texas will not put up with threats. Texas will fight. We'll fight anybody who comes after us and our lifestyle and who we are, and they will get a Texas-sized fight. Know that now. I said, good man. Things are a lot different than what you think they are. As I traveled around, I used to for a long time, I would go up, and even more so than now, I would talk about all the issues that we all know of. And one day I decided, you know, what is that doing? Now our youth, everyone thinks, that's how they see us. That's how they see our country, is nothing but negative, 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 negative. So I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. One day I was asked to speak at the Atlanta, Texas High School. And I gladly accepted. There's a couple of things that I told them. One is one thing that I tell everybody. I know sometimes it gets hard. But let me tell you the key to success. The key to success is perseverance. That's what it is. You keep pushing no matter what. You never back down. You never stop. You never surrender. You never retreat. Ever. And let me tell you, I tell these people, you've seen the little toy in the mall, right? The toy that bumps into the wall and it backs up. Be the toy. Because that toy hits the wall and it backs up. And it goes a different direction. Hits the wall again, it backs up. Goes a different direction. But eventually that toy does what? It makes it around the wall. So even with all those obstacles put in its way, eventually it met its goal, getting around the wall. That's what we have to do. We have to be the kind of person that says, okay, I know they're putting the walls up. I know they're doing all this stuff. Get around them. Keep going. Don't ever stop. I went in this room. It was a Veterans Day thing. And some of the veterans asked me, and the teachers walked up and they said, what are you going to talk about today, Mike? And I said, well, I never really know. But I kind of think I'm going to talk about American exceptionalism. And I saw a couple of guys roll their eyes. Oh. One of them leans over and he says, I don't know how well that's going to go over. Well, at that point, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that's what I was going to talk about. Because it needed to be said. So I went in. They had the entire school, high school, in the gym. The entire school. It came my time. They put on a wonderful presentation. It came my time. I went up. And I started talking to them about American exceptionalism. And I told them, it's a term that you don't hear anymore. And there are those, I hear it all the time, that are offended by it and say, there's no such thing. Really? You're wrong. And I will argue that point with anyone, anywhere, anytime. This is being recorded, so I welcome anyone who wants to challenge me on that. We are exceptional people. We're not that different from some of the people around the world, and I've been all over the world multiple times in my 20-year military career. But let me tell you something. I call it a freedom virus. There are some people around the world that cannot live their lives until they leave and get to America. Because they have this feeling, I call it a virus, this bug that they catch where they want to be Americans. They want to be free. They just don't want to come here like you're seeing today just for the handouts, the freebies, and the money and tell you how much they hate our country. If that's the case, go back. Go back to the no rights having country you came from. We don't need you here. But we've got people who come all the time and they want to be Americans. They want to talk like Americans. They want to dress like Americans. They want to fight for America. They want to be everything that what they know we used to be. And I talked to them about that and how we got there. We're unique. Do you know when Washington wintered at Valley Forge? This is not battle time. They were just hunkered down trying to wait out the winter. Do you know that he lost an average of 10 men a day? And no fighting. 10 men a day. They died from dysentery. They died from starvation. And some of them sitting outside, leaning against the wall, with no shoes on, froze to death in the middle of the night. So typically, the next morning, they'd have a head count. There were minus 10 men. Why didn't they just get up and go home? There was nothing holding them there. You know why. You know why. Because they're like us. They believe in freedom. And they believe that our freedoms came from God, no one else. And that the King of England had no right to restrict our freedoms. They wanted to be Americans, and they're willing to die for it. Here in this room, we are too. But it's becoming something that's even fewer and fewer today. Those men fought and were willing to die for what they believed in. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. We could go on into World War I. Look at the men who fought in the trenches with the gas attacks. How terrible that was. They're fighting out there in the trenches. If you lifted your head above the trench, more than likely you'd get hit by sniper fire. And then the gas came. Guys were dying left and right. They're dying from different diseases down in the mud. Imagine being in the mud in the rain. And what that would do to you and what it would be like living like that for that amount of time. But our boys persevered. They fought on. And we moved forward as a nation. They did the same thing in World War II. How do you fight a war on two fronts, two major conflicts, with two enemies the way we had, without patriots like we had then? It's almost impossible to do that. I often tell a story about a good friend of mine. Her name was Jerry. She was a Pearl Harbor survivor. She wasn't in the military. She was the spouse of a military wife. And I often tell people that's the hardest job in the military. And it is. Tracy, when I was over in the war, was our ombudsman. Jerry and her husband were over in Hawaii, and he had been sent out. He was with the Marines. And I'm going to tell you, this was a long time ago. When he first went in the Marine Corps, they were still using mules to pull the artillery. So he is out on one of the islands, and they had gotten hit pretty hard. But they'd also gotten word that Pearl Harbor had been hit. So to say the least, they were both very worried about each other. Very worried. They didn't know if each other were alive or dead. And I sat there one day with Jerry when the newspaper knocked on her door and wanted to interview her prior to Pearl Harbor Day. And she told this story, and I couldn't help but just sit there in awe. She said when the planes came and the bombing started, she grabbed her children who were small, and she ran to the nearest place she thought she could find shelter, and it was a baseball diamond there on the base. And remember, they had the baseball dugouts that went partially underground. She took her kids, and they hunkered down in that. She had them all huddled up for safety. Meanwhile, a soldier runs by, running to the fight. Because, see, that's what we do. We don't run from the fight, we run to the fight. Even if it means we're going to die. Soldier runs by, and he looks back at Jerry and her children, and he runs, and he just slows until he's just standing there. And she could see him contemplating for a moment. Then he turns, and he runs over to her at a trot. And he pulls out his sidearm, and he hands it to her. He says, "Take this." And her first thought is, what good is that going to do me with all of these Japanese here? But it was different than what she thought. He handed her that sidearm, and he looked at her, and he said, "Don't let them take your children prisoner. Don't let them take them prisoner." And he turned to run off, and she realized what he was saying. Use that gun on your children before you let the Japanese take them. And to think of what that woman went through, sitting there, thinking about what she might have to do. I just can't imagine. But she pushed forward. They made it out okay. But she is absolutely what I call a picture of American exceptionalism. The kind of people that we are. We don't give up. We don't surrender. In Korea, look at the forces we fought. In the coldest weather I've ever been in my life. I've been to the Arctic, but I have never experienced anything as cold as the weather in Korea. But our boys did it. Vietnam, just the opposite problem. The jungle. The enemies in the tunnels. You never knew where they were going to come from. And the worst part about it is when our boys came home, they came home to a country that spit on them and told them they hated them. Called them every name in the book. But I'm here to tell you today that every one of the men and women who went over there, they're heroes. Every single one of them. And they are an absolute picture of American exceptionalism. They are. I went over in the Gulf War. There were a lot of good people over there. And they were all volunteer, every one of them. And after the Gulf War, we had multiple groups going over there. In Afghanistan, Iraq. Let me tell you something. You've all heard the story of Marcus Luttrell, lone survivor, Operation Red Wing. And a lot of people think that's exclusive to SEAL team, that attitude. It's not. I worked with the SEALs a lot when I flew the hovercraft. We were an assault craft unit. And I had an opportunity to work with them a lot. They're great guys. When Tracy and I got married, I was working with a group of SEALs that we were stationed together, what was called Water Survival and Physical Training Unit in RTC San Diego, Recruit Training Command. So I knew them very well. And like I said, throughout my career, worked very closely with them. It's not exclusive to them, that attitude. It's the kind of people that we have in our military today. That's why we see the things that we see, like in that movie. No retreat, no surrender. I often talk to people about a sergeant, Sergeant Kapacheski. I want to make sure I have this story right. I often tell it. The sergeant was over in Iraq, I'm pretty sure it was Iraq. And he's in a Humvee and he's going underneath an overpass, and an insurgent dropped a grenade down inside the gun turret. He rolls around next to his leg, and of course you know what happened. So he goes to the hospital and he goes through many surgeries, this Army surgeon. Many surgeries. And they just never could repair it right. They saved one, but they didn't save the other. They were trying to, and one day, here's the attitude. The doctor comes in, they're getting prepared to do another surgery, or plan one, and apparently Sergeant Kapacheski says, "Doc, cut it off already. Get me back to my unit." He wants back in the fight. Really? With one leg? He wants back in the fight. So they cut off his leg, they fit him with a prosthetic. They thought they were going to give Sergeant Kapacheski a desk job. Didn't happen to turn out that way. He finally got full combat positioning again. He goes to Afghanistan and he goes into combat with a prosthetic leg and ends up dragging a man to safety under fire, a wounded soldier. That's American exceptionalism. Well, let me tell you, it didn't start with any particular president in office or any politicians in there. That's not where American exceptionalism started. It's bred into us. It's who we are. It's you. All these wonderful soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. You know where they came from? You raised them. You taught them these values. They didn't just get there. I trained recruits in boot camp. I don't have enough time. I can't train them those values. I need you to do it. I need you to send them to me. I could teach them how to shine their boots. I could teach them how to make a bed. I could teach them how to march. I could teach them how to use a weapon. But I can't teach them the values that you did to defend the weak. We're the only country on this planet that believes in defending the weak. We are the only country on this planet that will give our lives for somebody else's freedom. I was speaking one day and a man came up to me afterwards. You know, it's funny because if you think the left doesn't send people in here to spy, they do it all the time. They send them in, and I can always say something, and I'll get one of them, and I can see them go, and then they always come up afterwards. They can't help it. And he comes up and he goes, "So you think you're better than the rest of the world?" I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, you're talking about American exceptionalism. You think you're better," and he was a foreigner. "You think you're better than the rest of the world and the rest of us." I said, "I didn't say we're better. I said we're exceptional." English, okay? So, he says, "Well, I think you're saying you're better." I said, "Well, let me ask you. What will you die for?" He goes, "Oh. I said, well, let me just tell you something. All the people I just spoke about, the people in this room, we are the only people on the planet that will die because we care more about your freedom than you do. He had no comeback. We are an exceptional people. And I make no bones about it. I go to everyone and I talk to them about what you've done. You did it. I didn't do it. No politician did it. You raised these kids. When I was speaking at that high school in Atlanta, Texas, I want you to know that when I finished, I got probably a 10-minute standing ovation. Wow. If you don't think that's encouraging, not for me, it was encouraging. You know, I'm not sitting there getting a big head over it. I'm looking at that going, holy cow, we might have a chance now. Look at these kids. They think the same way we do. They're on their feet. They believe in this stuff. They want to be a part of it. That was encouraging. The work that you're doing every day in here, the stuff that you're doing, you think, oh, another day coming over to We the People. Sometimes it gets a little monotonous. But you're having an impact that you cannot imagine. You're having an impact not just on people in church, people at the corner market, but more importantly, our youth. That's where your impact is being made. And that's where it's important, our youth. Because those are the guys who are going to take these principles of our founding fathers. Could be.
Can you go with the handheld?
Sure. I don't even need a mic.
Right.
But I can go with handheld.
What's the name on the mic?
Jeremy. So I can't use this one. I need the one that says Mike. It must be mine. It says Mike on the back, so okay. But that's where it's really going to matter. It's going to matter with those kids because they're going to be the ones that are going to take these principles of our founding fathers. They're going to be the ones who believe in freedom of speech. They're going to be the ones that continue that go out and do what you're doing today. They're going to be the ones who are going to go out and they're going to buy guns and they're going to put them away. Maybe they're not hunters. Maybe it's because they know they have the constitutional right to do it and they're just going to buy it anyway just to prove they have the constitutional right. Those are the ones that are going to continue making this difference for our country. And I was so encouraged when I saw them there. And they stood up, and then afterwards, no one walked out. And it was time for them to go. Teachers, students, they all waited for me to walk off the stage. And they all shook my hand, they patted me on the back. And that was great. But they have no idea it meant more to me, their performance meant more to me than anything they could have said. Because now I'm encouraged. And it just made me want to go out even more to talk to everybody. You're going to be surprised at the different groups. I was in a church the other day, and it was an all-black church. And everyone in that church said, Obama's a disgrace. Wow. Obama is an embarrassment. He's the worst president we've ever had. He's a disappointment. And I stood there going, wow, what's the trick? I know something's going to happen here. I thought, well, maybe they didn't give them enough. And I'm not trying to stereotype, because I know there are a lot of blacks who feel that way, who understand, same thing we do, you know. But I just didn't expect that there. And it come to find out, it had nothing to do with the giveaways or anything like that. They felt the same way we felt. That they said, we didn't sign on for this. We did not sign on for this. We love America. And he's doing everything he can to collapse it. That was encouraging. To me, that group of people, that was American exceptionalism. That's what we believe in and what we stand for. I ask every one of you not to do anything different than what you've been doing. I want you to continue coming to your meetings. I want you, if anything, to add some American exceptionalism to what you tell people. Go out and tell them how wonderful this nation is. We have some problems? You bet we do. And we're trying to get him out of office as fast as we can. And those other guys who run behind him. You know who some... I'm probably going to get myself in trouble here. You know who Boehner reminds me of? You remember the cartoon? Obama is the bulldog, and he's walking down the street. And the little chihuahua is Boehner bouncing around, going, hey, Ralphie, what are we going to do today, Ralphie? Tell me what to do, Ralphie. What are we going to do? That's Obama and Boehner. And I'm just amazed that people haven't figured it out yet. But I think you got to find that more and more and more and more they're figuring it out. My problem is I hope it's not too late by the time everybody figures it out. I don't think that it's going to get any better. Of course, the one good news today is Bob is filming me via the internet today. That's great. The government still hasn't taken it over yet. So we still have a little bit of freedom with that. My surprise is that people just haven't learned yet. They haven't figured it out. Of course, I know there are those people who, they go to work every day, and they come home. But, times have changed. We no longer can just go to work and come home and go, okay, yeah, it's election day. Let me see the election voter guide. Okay, let me read through it. If you do that, you might as well just take everything in your bank account, give it to the government, take all your guns, turn them in, because government is like a fire. It wants more. It's going to burn and grow and burn and grow as much as it can, and that's what we're seeing today. That's exactly what we're seeing. So what I would ask you today is remember those troops. Remember the people that gave their lives for our freedom, starting with our founding fathers. Remember the things that they suffered. I sometimes will get up here and I read a story about the founding fathers. You need to read that. You can go online. And it tells the story about what happened to them. I go into schools and I ask them, do you know what happened to your founding fathers, when they declared our independence? You think, they declared independence and everything was great. Life was wonderful. No, they suffered. Some of them lived in caves because they were being pursued by the British. Okay? These are your signers that lived in caves. Their families disappeared, never saw their families again. Wives locked up, died while incarcerated. It was not easy. They suffered because they knew what was at stake, just like you know right now. I would ask you to go out, talk about these troops, talk about our founding fathers, talk to everybody you see. Don't stop. Remember how important they are, and continue teaching your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors' children. If they're on your property, they're fair game. You don't want me to give them conservative politics? Keep them in your yard. Don't send them over here. If you do that, I promise you, that will be the one thing that will ensure that we remain one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all of us. Thank you so much for your time. If you have questions... Thank you very much. Thank you. You're too kind. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am. You're on.
I don't need it. Why do you... Lower that a little. Why do you think the veterans are so vilified by DHS?
Well, let's think about who the veterans are. The veterans are always going to be the villain. Always. Because we have the training. The veterans in this country, not that I advocate this, but the veterans are the very people who have the power to rise up and take over our government. They are the people. Now, being the people that they are, they're not going to do that because they swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and our leaders. It would be, I tell you, it would have to be pretty bad before I think the veterans would do that. But I can tell you, the veterans are patriots to this country. Let me just clear that up for all you viewers on the internet, all you liberals that are screaming and kicking the table right now. They are patriots. But I'm going to tell you, they stand at the ready. And I know that because I'm a veteran. And they're standing at the ready. But, our veterans may not only have to defend us against a tyrant, our government, but they may have to, looking more so every day, defend us against some outside force that's going to come in. But the government, I believe, and I really believe this, I believe that Obama is trying to collapse America. If you look at everything, that he's doing step by step, it's all to collapse America. He's going right down that checklist. And at this point, he just doesn't care who it offends. He's just going to do it. He doesn't care if it's legal. He's just going to do it. And that's fine, But we have guys, I'm telling you, you'd be surprised what's out there. And they don't mean any harm toward the government. They're not traitors. They're not somebody who wants to come in and say, okay, we're taking over the government. They're not doing that. But what they are is they're ready for the fight when the fight comes. And the left, Obama knows that. And so they do everything to make these guys the villain. They want you to see them as the villain. And the other thing, one last thing about that, they've always hated the benefits that the military get. Well, they earned them. They put their lives on the line, okay? And in that socialist movement, they want you to take, and they're already trying to do it, take the benefits from the military to give to the, let me just say this. You got me here, Bob, on the internet? And give it to the slugs who won't work.
Well, sir, I'll tell you the same thing I've told many of my friends that are veterans. I'm not a veteran, but by golly, if you go, call me. I don't know what I can do, but I can cook, I can clean, I can carry ammo. I'll do whatever I can to support you.
Thank you. Well, let's get back to that most important job, cooking.
Could we have more examples of American exceptionalism?
Well, I think as far as you can look around you every day and see American exceptionalism. Not all of our teachers are socialists. Many of them are great patriots, and they do a wonderful job of teaching our kids. The prime example was Atlanta, Texas. Of course, we talked about the military. We talked about the police. Not all the police are, there's a few bad apples everywhere, okay? But our police do a wonderful job. They put their lives on the line every day. I could go all day long. American exceptionalism. You don't have to be a fireman, a policeman, a teacher, in the military to be an exceptional person. Let me just tell you, people in this room have jobs. You have jobs. And you know what your job does? I don't care what your job is. Your job does something to support a company. That company makes money. They pay taxes. They keep our economy strong. With that, the military can buy bullets and beams. That's American exceptionalism. See, we have pride in our work. Other places around the world, they go to work, they do their thing, they draw a paycheck, they could care less. In America, and I know you were taught the same way I was. I grew up incredibly poor. When I joined the Navy, I had one shirt, one pair of pants, no socks, and a pair of tennis shoes with left toe torn out. I spent 6 months on my first ship, never left it because I had to send my paycheck home to support my mother and my little brother. We were poor. My education was horrible. I could barely read and write. I educated myself, went to college. I did that on my own. Why? Because I had an exceptional mother and grandmother. Grandmother couldn't read. Okay, I remember her walking me around a hot summer field, going to a lady's house, handed her, when the lady asked, "What can I do for you?" wearing a bonnet. My grandmother pulled a letter out and said, "I received a post today. I hoped you could read it to me." She couldn't read, but she taught me not to look down to my nose at people who had more than I had. They probably worked for it and they earned it. And she taught me, if I want more, get out and work for it. That's American exceptionalism.
This is not a question. If voting changed anything, voting would be illegal. believe it.
Well, I guess I would agree to that somewhat, but I would say no, because they're using our system against us. If you believe Obama won re-election, I have some land for sale, okay? There's no way. I've looked at too much of this. Maxine Waters had a testimony. She had a hearing. She brought in a guy, and they testified. I think I mentioned this last time I was here. And they found that this company had some software that they could put into the machine that would give you a 5149 outcome. That's all you had to do, is put software in there. You could tell it what outcome you wanted, it would give you the outcome. Now, everybody knows Miss Waters. We know her. Is there anybody in this room who thinks that armed with the information that you have this software that you could put it in this machine and you could win the re-election, is there anybody in here that thinks that they were going to risk the first black president of the United States not being re-elected? Really? That would imply that he's a failure. That can't happen. So, is there anybody who really believes that Maxine Waters didn't use that software in their behalf? Not likely. Not likely.
Thank you. After reading news today, I was discouraged. I needed to hear this message of exceptionalism. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Do you have a solution reinstating our constitutional militia?
I don't have a solution, I guess. I haven't sat down and figured out a solution for that, but I'm going to tell you what has to happen, is we have to be a lot more aggressive. They're very aggressive on the left. We have to be a lot more aggressive. When's the last time you saw a Tea Party? Where's the Tea Party at now? I emceed the St. Louis Tea Party. I went up there. Dick Morris was there. I introduced Dick Morris. But I went up there with my radio co-host, and we emceed that. We had about 26,000 people turn out, okay, underneath the arch. Why haven't we done that lately? And here's another thing that gets me, is when we do have a Tea Party. Man, I tell you what, I've gone to some tea parties and I'd stand there and I'd listen to the people that they had come up and speak, and I thought, why are we here? Why did you bring this line of people in? Everybody saying the same thing, the same thing, the same thing. Motivate people. You're our army. That's the one thing I learned in the military, is if I wanted my guys to perform, I had to come out, I had to pat them on the back, and I had to give words of encouragement. I had to motivate them. I had to inspire them. Where's the Tea Party? Where's it at? We need a Tea Party. And I tell you what, you put it together and you call Mike Lee, and I'll even say a whole lot more that I didn't say today, but...
How do you respond to the claims that the Constitution was not written in a way that all people are or should be treated equally? And the second part of the question is, do you think the 14th Amendment is necessary?
Well, let me put it this way. I can't really respond because I'm in a church. I believe the Constitution as it was written. Our founding fathers were absolutely inspired. And I mean this. I believe our founding fathers were inspired by God. I believe that. There is nothing like it on the face of the planet. As far as the amendments go, there are many of the amendments that I agree with. But there are some let me just say that were not inspired by God. I think that when we start looking at the amendments, we're looking at people who came together and they made these amendments, so they were padding their own bed. And we're going to see, I'm surprised we haven't had several issues now, especially since they have the power and they don't care what they do that's illegal. I'm really surprised that they haven't gone some way to try to even add and change the Constitution more than it is right now, to put some ridiculous things in it. Let me tell you something. I am a true blue, freedom-loving person. And I really believe, I'm very moral. I go to church. And I believe in treating everyone fairly. Everyone. I have said many times when I was in that black church the other day, one of the things I said is, you know what? And they agreed with me wholeheartedly. I said, racism exists because we teach it to them. And not us on TV. You could take a room full of children from every race, put them in a room, raise them up, and there's not going to be an issue. It's not going to be an issue until we set them down and tell them, oh, by the way, you're supposed to hate him. And if you don't, you know why you should hate him? Because look what he did to your ancestors. Okay? That's essentially what they're doing to us. That needs to stop. I support anyone. I'm very conservative. I don't believe in alternative lifestyles. So if you want to be gay, that's your right. You can do that. That's between you and God. And I'm not going to try to lynch you or anything else. I don't care about that. I'm a sailor. If you want to rub your 5 o'clock shadow with another guy's 5 o'clock shadow, knock yourself out. I don't really care. But don't ask me to tell my kids that it's okay, because it's not. Okay? I know someone who's in the military now. I know several young people, and it's appalling. I have a hard time with it, even as early as this morning, talking about some issues where they're in the military, and they have just been inundated in his unit with gays. And I don't mean, if you're a gay guy or a woman and you keep it to yourself, and the military, by the way, has always had them. And do you know that we always knew who they were? And that was okay because they were patriots like us and they did their job, but they kept it to themselves. I don't go in and talk about my intimate life. I don't want them to talk to me about it, okay? But what they've done is they've not only, Obama, infused the military with this huge group of homosexuals, some of them, flamboyant is the nicest thing I can say about them. And that's just crazy that we have that person in a uniform acting that way. And that person, as of today, I had a conversation with someone, that flamboyant gay member of the armed forces is able to stand and say things and talk about things that the other sailors would never be allowed to talk about. And that's just wrong. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in equal rights. Equal for everyone, not some to give them the upper hand. I don't believe in it.
This is our last question. What is your opinion of why the U.S. government has purchased up so much ammunition and stockpiled it when everyone knows the ammo they have purchased is not ammo the government can use?
It's a simple question, and there's a simple answer. So you can't get it. That's why. So, oh no, I don't have any ammunition. I don't have any at all, okay? That's a lie. I've got plenty. And they'll never find it, okay? However, that's why. They don't want you to have it, so he's going out and he's buying it up. So you can't have it. His goal was to disarm us. I'm just going to tell you the way I believe. I have no proof. But I believe in watching what he's doing and the group of people that he has encircled himself with. What seated U.S. president would put self-confessing communist in his cabinet, in his administration? Unless he was a communist. But I think it's worse than that. I believe in my heart. For a long time I would say he's a communist, he's a communist, he's a communist. I don't think he is. I think that he is a radical Muslim. And I believe this is for one purpose. He's here to collapse the United States and to squash Christianity. That's his purpose. So, they're going to try to buy up, but I got news for them. There were a lot of people bought a lot of ammunition. And let me tell you something else. I say this all the time. I don't believe this is going to end without fighting in the streets. And it's not going to be the conservatives attacking people. It's going to start with us defending ourselves is what it's going to start with. But let me just tell you something. There's going to be one of two things happen. There's going to be a lot of ammunition to be picked up out there when it happens. It's either going to be your ammunition they're picking up or their ammunition you're picking up. So you're not going to need very many rounds, not where you're thinking, because there will be ammunition out there. And I would tell you, start buying. Whatever you can get, put it away so that you have it. Because, and not just that, water purification. I taught survival in the military. You need water purification. You need food stores. You know, I speak to a lot of different churches, a lot of different groups. The Mormon church puts away, they talk about a year's supply. And they do that because not only something like this may happen, but you may be unemployed. You may need it. Okay? But I can tell you, I know people that have 2 years supply, 3 years supply. And you're going to need, like I said, you're going to need all that stuff. And don't forget, I'm going to tell you now, maybe this is an appropriate place to say it, but I'm going to say, when you put your emergency kit together, guys, ladies are going to pat me on the back in a minute. Do not forget the sanitary napkins. Nobody puts that in there because they're multi-purpose. You can use them for bandages, and of course your wife will love you for it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the invite to come back.